Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I thought I'd do a video on a few budget-friendly meals. So today I'm going to start with the beef broth, and then I've got a dessert. I've got another loaf to cook. It's going to be a long day of cooking, but I hope it gives you some ideas. And so let's get into it. I got these beef bones from the butcher. I got them for a very good price. They were only $5 a kilo. So I've got 2 kilos of beef bones here. You can just use 1 kilo, but this recipe is just for 1 to 2 kilos. So as long as you've got a carrot, some celery, some parsley, and some onions, really it's just the bones and the apple cider vinegar that is the most expensive part of this recipe, but you only need 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and a bottle will last you a long time. So I'm calculating that you're looking at around about $12 to make this recipe, and this recipe will go so far. Okay, you substitute this as a gravy by just adding some corn flour or flour to it and butter and pepper and salt. So you've always got gravy basically there if you freeze this stock. While I was talking before, you would have seen me add in the water. I've used 4 litres of water for 1 to 2 kilos of beef bones. I am using the 2 pots here because I know that they're not going to fit in one pot. And you sort of just have to look at it throughout the day, and you might need to add more water to it as well. So I thought this was the best option. The bones have so much meat on them. Well, these ones did. So I'm pretty lucky. So I can remove the meat from the bones and just add the meat and vegetable back into the stock and make either a stew or just keep it as a soup. But when you do that, you just have to be very careful. Once you do sieve the stock out, that there's sometimes little small fragments of bones that can be stuck to the vegetables or the meat. So you have to be very careful of giving them to children as well. So when it comes to giving this to kids, I would sieve it a few times, the liquid, just to be sure. And here I'm just chopping up 2 carrots and some celery, just a couple of stalks of celery. Even if you've just got 1 carrot in the fridge, a little bit of celery, that's okay. The vegetables are just to give the beef stock a little bit more flavour, and also it makes it easier if you want to make a soup out of it because you've already cut the vegetables up. Now I'm just going to put all these vegetables into a bowl, and then I'm going to divide it up at the end between the 2 pots, chop up 2 onions. Onions are a bit of a necessity for this because beef broth is very, very bland without onion or some sort of vegetable in there. So now I'm just chopping up around about a handful of parsley I've gotten out of my vegetable garden. You could substitute this for dry parsley. And once I chop that up, I'll add everything to the pots. The pots have already got the water in them, so I've brought them up to heat. I've started the cookers on high, and I will probably just cook them on high for around about an hour or so to just get it up and going. Everyone's cooker's different, so I guess you just have to go with it and, see how you go. So now I'll just divide the vegetables between the 2 pots. I didn't think there was going to be as much meat on these when I first bought them, but there is so much meat on them. So I've decided just to put 2 bones in the smaller pot and 3 in the other one. Look at the meat on that one. So the big pot had 4 bones in it and the smaller pot had 2 in it. I just didn't want to overflow them. The thing with this recipe is you do have to get up super early. I've been up since 5:30 this morning to make this. it does have to stay on for a whole day. The longer you leave it, the better. Now I'll just put the parsley in, and after that I'm going to add the 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar into the pots. And then basically that's it. So it is a really simple recipe, and you're going to get a lot of food out of this recipe and a lot of goodness as well. Like I said, you can make a lot of things with the meat if you've got a lot of meat on the bones like I have. Once this is cooked, I'll remove the meat and I'm going to freeze the meat and vegetables, and I'm going to use that in meat pies or even a stew. So this is a really good recipe and it's going to get you a long way. So now I've just seasoned it with some salt and pepper, and I'm going to pop the lids on, and I'm just going to leave it now for the day. I will turn it down to a low heat, and and I'll just keep on checking it, and you'll see it get richer and richer in colour. I'll come back to it occasionally and show you throughout the day what the stock looks like. So now I'm going to make a batch of sausage rolls. My kids love these. It's pretty easy. It's just 3 sheets of puff pastry, 500 grams of sausage mince, 2 tablespoons of tomato sauce, 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs, 1 onion grated, 1 carrot grated, 2 tablespoons of barbecue sauce. I'm going to put a tablespoon of Italian herbs in this. This recipe I will put below, but I'm just going to tweak it a little bit and put some Italian herbs, and I'm going to leave out the mustard powder. I will add some parsley as well. And before I put the sausage rolls in the oven, I'm going to make an egg wash. This is by choice. It's not part of the recipe. I'm just going to add 1 egg with some milk, brush it over the sausage rolls, and I will put sesame seeds on the top because we really love sesame seeds on breads and sausage rolls. I've cut the pastry into 2 halves here. Then I'll place the sausage mince onto that half as far to the end as I can. And then I will just spread it over that half. These homemade sausage rolls are very budget friendly, and you can fill them up with lots of vegetables and you can put more breadcrumbs. I think that these were a little bit too meaty for me. Next time I'll be putting a little bit more breadcrumbs in them and a little bit more carrot or even celery to bulk them up a bit. I got 24 sausage rolls out of these ingredients, but I think you could comfortably make around about 36 of them. Like I'm talking about 36 smaller size ones by adding more vegetables and breadcrumbs. As long as you've got the sausage mince in the house, or some people use sausages and take the skins off them. You can use the sausage mince out of sausages too. I've never done it, but you can do it that way as well. So as long as you've got that in the house and puff pastry, basically you can make these. It's whatever you've got in the crisper. You can put celery in them and carrot. And if you don't even have breadcrumbs, you can just use bread and put it through a processor, and you don't need sesame seeds. So these are definitely something you can make for under $10, and you could get possibly 36 out of them, or maybe even more if you don't like a lot of meat in them. So here I'll just show you how I'm going to cut them up. I'm going to roll them really tightly up, as you can see, and then I'm just going to make sure that the end part is sealed to the sausage roll, just by pushing it down with your fingertips. And then I'm going to chop them into half. Some people just like them into half like this. Like I know my husband just likes bigger ones, so he would prefer them cut like this. But for the kids, I'm going to chop them in half again. You could make these as small as you wanted them. You could cut them up into another half as well, and you'd get heaps more. So here I'm just going to pop them onto a baking tray with baking paper. And I'm just sort of making sure there's a little bit of space between them there. So I'm just going to keep rolling these up and cutting them, and then I'll show you how I make the egg wash. I don't have a recipe for the egg wash, so I'm just going to estimate here. I'm using around about 30 ml of milk and 1 egg, and I'm just going to whisk that up really, really well. It's a bit like scrambled eggs. And then once I've whisked that, I'm just going to get my pastry brush and brush it over the sausage rolls. And it's as easy as that, and then you can sprinkle sesame seeds or poppy seeds if you want to. You don't even have to put the seeds on top. So I'm going to bake these for around about 35 minutes, depending on how hot your oven is. So just keep an eye on them. And it's cooking at around about 200 degrees or 180 degrees if it's fan forced. Now I'm going to make the kids a junket. When I was a kid, we used to get the vanilla flavoured, the raspberry flavoured, and the pineapple junket tablets. But now I think you can only get these ones, and they're just like a plain junket. So I'm just going to show you how I make it. I'm just going to follow the instructions on the box here. So basically it's just dissolving 1 tablet in a tablespoon of cold water. So I'm just going to sort of crush that in because it does take a long time to dissolve, and I'll just leave it there for a little while I'm heating up the milk. Stir it around and give it a little bit of a mix around with the spoon. Then I'm going to get 500 ml of fresh full cream milk. So it's a half a litre. There's a lot of milk that you need in this. When I was heating this up, I should have put the milk all together in the one bowl, but our microwave hasn't got a very high wattage and it takes a long time to heat up a lot of milk, or a lot of anything, to be honest. So I'm just going to do it in jugs like this. If you can do it in one lot, it's better because you sort of want the right temperature for the milk so it's all the same temperature, because the temperature really does matter when it comes to making junket. So I'm just going to keep making sure that the tablet is dissolved here while I'm heating up the milk. The milk has to be around 37 degrees. If you have a thermometer, that would be easier. So you just get the right temperature. I'm just using my small finger here just to test it. And I'm feeling like it's the right temperature. But if the milk is way too hot, if you get it off the stove or out of the microwave, just allow it to cool a little bit to about 37 degrees. Now I'm just going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of white sugar. You don't have to put sugar in it. I'm just doing it so it's a little bit sweeter for the kids. And then I'm just going to make sure that the tablet's all crushed up and the water is definitely the right temperature. And then once you pour this in, you basically have to really mix it quickly so it doesn't set. I should have stirred the sugar in the milk first before adding the junket tablet because I really don't want it to set, so I'm really going to give it a quick stir here. And then after I've done that and I feel that all the sugar's all stirred up and it's definitely all mixed in, I'm going to get some nutmeg. I've got a whole nutmeg here and I'm going to grate that. You can use ground nutmeg, it doesn't matter. The recipe doesn't ask for nutmeg. I'm just using nutmeg because that's the way my mum always did it. So I'm just going to grate that on top of it now. And then once I do that, I'm going to really be careful with it. I have to sort of move it to one side so I don't stir it up whatsoever. Junket is such a delicate thing to make. It's unbelievable. But if you do bump it in the fridge or move it and it does separate, it does get this way to it and it probably won't set very well. So you just have to be really careful when you move it around. So I'll push it to one side now and I'm going to leave it at room temperature for around 15 minutes. It takes this long to set. And once it's sort of firm, you want to put it in the fridge very gently and leave it for a few hours. The longer the better. And it'll be ready to serve out. And you've got a nice dessert. Now I'm just going to make an apple loaf. I found this recipe in an older cookbook that I had. So I've got all the ingredients laid out here. I've got 125 grams of margarine they have here, but I'm going to use butter. I'm going to add 2 cups of self-raising flour. Lately, I've really been enjoying making loaves. I've made 2 now in the last few weeks. They're just really easy to cut up and freeze and give the kids for their lunches. But I have found that when I do cut it up and put it in the cake tin or the cake keeper, it goes really quickly. It just doesn't last long. So I do make 2 of them out of this recipe and I freeze one, which I'll show you soon. I'll add 1 cup of brown sugar now and then I'll firmly push that down in the cup. Here I'm adding the brown sugar to the flour and the butter. I'll give it a little bit of a quick stir up and then I'm going to rub the butter into the flour and the sugar with my fingertips. So you'll want to rub the butter in till it makes like a fine crumb base. So I'm just going to continue here. The butter has to be like more on a colder side to do this. You can't melt the butter in the microwave because it won't work. I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon to the mix. It doesn't say how much vanilla to add, so I'm just going to put in a teaspoon, which I'm running low on, as you can see. And then I'll just mix it all in together and give it a good stir. The recipe says to put sultanas in it, but I've got currants because I like the currants and they're a little bit smaller for the kids. So it's 3/4 cup of sultanas, but I'm going to use currants. And when currants like burn, they really go nice and crispy as well. So I think they are my favourite. So I'll mix that in now. And then when it comes to the pie apples, I've got the Admona ones here. I buy these ones because there's less juice in them. But because there's not much juice in them either, we have to add a little bit of milk to it. But you can get cheaper apples than this. These are around about $3.20 a can. You can get apples for under $2 a can, so you can make this recipe a lot cheaper. So you can make 2 of these loaves for under $5 if you choose to get cheaper apples, and maybe you could use cheaper sultanas. So it is a cheap, budget-friendly cake. I think I added a couple of tablespoons of milk to this because there was no juice in these apples. So you just have to judge on how dry the apples are in the can, I guess. So now the junket's set enough now for me to put in the fridge, as you can see. So I'm going to pop that in the fridge for dessert tonight. And that makes a really cheap dessert too, the junket. So I'm going to mix that all in now, and the apples were, the slices were quite large, so I'm just going to break them up with a wooden spoon and then mix it all up. It has a very crumbly-like consistency and it looks very dry. So that's why I was a little bit worried on how much milk to add with this. When we tried this recipe, it was absolutely beautiful. It was amazing how moist the loaf was. It wasn't dry whatsoever. That's because the juices came out from the apples while it was cooking. This recipe would be great for stewed apples. If you're a person that stews apples, I do. I do a lot with apples for desserts, but you could use that if you didn't have any canned apples in the house. So here I'm just going to mix it up, and it's getting a little bit more wetter now, and I think I added a little bit more milk, so probably about 2 tablespoons of milk. And as you can see, that's the final product. So now I'm just going to add that to 2 tins. I've got 2 loaf tins here. And I've put baking paper in these loaf tins. If you don't have baking paper, you can grease them with butter. Now these will go in the oven for 50 minutes at 180 degrees. I think this was halfway through the day now, and you can see how rich the stock is looking and the meat starting to fall off the bones. So it's actually going to be quite a strong stock. I might even have to add some more water to it. These have been taken out of the oven and I've left them to cool for about 2 hours. And I'm going to take them out now. They're ready to be cut up. And the kids are really asking for them because they're hungry again. Yeah, we're just going to cut this up now, and I'm going to pop some into a freezer bag for lunches for the week. So this is what the junket looks like once it's set. I have left it in for the rest of the day, so this is dessert time here. You'll see little hands trying to grab the bowl as I'm trying to put it out, but there's hardly any way in the bottom here. This ended up being one of the best junkets I'd ever made. I think it's got a lot to do with the temperature and also using a good quality milk. I use Coles milk. It has just set really well, and there's just no whey or water in the bottom of the bowl like there usually is when I make junket. But as long as you've got junket tablets in the house and some milk, this dessert would cost under $2, and it would serve around about 4 people with maybe some fruit or something. But just the junket itself would be around about under $2 to make. So it's cheap. My kids are really eager to eat this, so I better serve it out. I've got my husband to help me here to take the meat off the bones. So he's just going to take it all out. It is a bit messy and you can see it's very gelatinous. And that is what you're sort of looking at when you're making the beef broth. It doesn't look very nice, I agree. So we're just going to take all this out now and we're going to sieve out all the juices. And then we're going to end up stripping off the meat off the bone. So this is a part where you want to be really careful. And like I said, you would want to sieve it a few times for children just to make sure. This sieve wasn't very fine. My other one broke. This is how much meat has come off the bones just from one cooker. There's a few ways of removing the fat from the stock. Firstly, you can let it settle for a few minutes after you've poured it out, and so it's set a little bit. And then you can just remove the fat off with a ladle. The traditional method is to chill the stock in the fridge, and then the fat will congeal into like a hard block. Then you just take the fat off and remove it, and then you'll have the stock left over. And as you can see here, I've got a few bags of stock here, and I'm going to pop that in the freezer, and a few bags of meat as well. Well, that's all today. It's been a really long day of cooking, but I've really enjoyed it. And thank you very much for watching. I hope I've given you some ideas on some budget-friendly meals, and I hope to see you in my next video. Thanks, everyone.